Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here on behalf of the Logosophical Foundation to host this workshop together with my friend, Francois Hassico. My name is Flávio Guimarães. I'm a chemical engineer. I was born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I run a technology business here in Houston, Texas, to where I moved 6 years ago. Most important, I'm the husband of Bia and the father of Theo, Nina, and Dante. I have been studying logosophy and volunteer at the Logosophical Foundation since 1995. So I'm going to start with a short introduction about the Logosophical Foundation, and then we go to the main subject tonight. So the Logosophical Foundation was created in 1930 in Argentina by the educator and thinker González Pecotti. And it's accredited in Americas and in Europe, also in Israel and Australia, as a non-profit organization with no political nor religious liaisons of any kind. So it's a private-owned institution funded by its fellow members. What I really like about the Logosophical Foundation, because there are many institutions all over the globe that seek to offer a better world to humanity. So the Logosophical Foundation goes the other way around. It seeks to offer a better human being to the world. And one way to do this is through education. So besides the Logosophical Foundations, where the adults can study, there are also several Logosophical schools where children can study the usual curriculum in elementary, junior high, high school, based on the Logosophical pedagogy. Its founder, González Pecotti, devoted his life to develop this work of betterment of humankind. He wrote several books. He was the editor of 2 magazines and 1 newspaper, and gave more than 1,000 conferences and classes committed in teaching and promoting the Logosophical knowledge around the world. So the idea today is to address how these cognitions have been supporting our fatherhood experiences and helping us with our goals to become better fathers and better human beings. As a chemical engineer, I have over 30 years experience in optimization of industrial and business processes, working with several different technologies. I got to know logosophy when I was finishing my master's, and what I found there was a framework of knowledge and techniques, not only to optimize my own life with a very specific method, but to transform it completely. In this study, there are 2 main goals: to become a better human being in this whole dimension, the physical, psychological, and the spiritual, and also to work for the betterment of humankind. And when we look around, the closest humankind that we have is our family. So among all the different lives that I live, being a father is one of the most important ones. But building a family is still a mystery for me, even after all these years. I feel that's very transcendental to create something based out of love. A love that we cultivate in a marriage and can be, according to logosophy, sustained by its 3 main elements: patience, tolerance, and constancy. As an engineer, for me, it's great to know the composition of the foundation of what I'm building, especially to reinforce it when needed. But I will get to these elements later on. What struck me was I was wondering one day, reflecting with myself, when have I started to love my children? When this love begun? And how big is this love? I realized that I started to love my children in the very moment I knew my wife was pregnant. In all 3 times, I felt an immense love for beings that I have no clue who they are and who they will become. How can this be possible? What kind of link exists between a father and his children? And how can so much love suddenly appear in our hearts? And what can we do along the way in order to grow it? We know this is a great challenge. It's not, oh, that's great, my wife is pregnant and now we're going to be happy forever. There's a lot of challenges. Yeah. So although family and our kids are the most wonderful thing in our lives, and we love them so much, everyone faces difficult moments. And why sometimes we are not our best selves when we are close to them? Why sometimes we treat better and nicer our friends and co-workers than our family? To help me answer these questions, I felt the need to know better myself, understanding the causes of my actions and behaviors in order to lead them to positive outcomes instead of discussions and disagreements. Since the knowledge of oneself is one of the main goals of the Logosophical study, I have been using its framework of resources to help my efforts to become a better father. So the study of logosophy comprises a psychological and the spiritual natures. So there are a lot of resources to be known and used. The workshop today is non-exhaustive, and we will highlight mainly the resources that we have been using in our experience. We can group these resources in different categories. And so there are the concepts. The concepts are very important because in logosophy we understand that they are the moral reserves of humankind. They are the mental faculties that all together they form our intelligence. So all the capabilities of our intelligence. The other group is the sensitive faculties, very analogous to the intelligences. So the sensitive faculties all together form a sensibility. And last but not least, the moral assets. So the values that we have been cultivating in order to form a dignity. So to give examples, to start to give some examples how we have been using those resources, I will hand over to Francois.
All right. Thank you, Flavio. Good evening, everybody. Very happy to be with you tonight. So just before I start, I'm gonna briefly introduce myself. Again, I'm François Racicot. I'm located in Montreal, in Canada. And I've been studying logosophy for about just under 2 years now. And I'm also the father of two beautiful teenage daughters, age 15 and 18. So what I'm going to talk about with you today is the concept of time. So I want to explore this a little bit more, and how I've learned about the concept of time with my children, with my daughters. And to do this, I'm going to start with a song that I believe illustrates quite well, actually, this concept. So this is a song by a band called Les Deux Frères, which means the two brothers. And the song is called Grande Personne, which means a grown-up, basically. In the song, it's basically the story of a little boy who is talking to his father and asking him to come and play with him. And the father tells him, oh, just hold on just 1 minute, please, because he's busy working. And then the boy complains that, he's looking at the clock, and even though his father told him to wait just 1 minute, the clock has gone all the way around, basically. So it's been 60 minutes, and his father is still busy and not playing with him. Then he goes on to say that, it's not necessarily when his dad is home that he makes his first steps. He doesn't wait for his dad to come home to make his first steps. And at the end of the song, he concludes by saying, it's not necessarily when it's convenient for you that I will become a grande personne or a grown-up. And I think this is so true because, time flies. Everyone who has grown-up kids would probably understand what I'm saying, that, with the blink of an eye, they've become grown-ups without us really realizing. And also, I think that when we have children, when we become parents, we need to adapt to their rhythm rather than them adapting to our rhythm. So when I look back, I really wish that I would have spent a little bit more time with my two daughters. You can see on this picture here, me with my family, my two daughters. But when I started studying logosophy, and that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about the concept of time, I thought this was one of the most practical application in my everyday life, especially when logosophy teaches us that, time that has been wasted or lost in the past, it cannot be recuperated or it cannot be made up. So this quote from one of the book, Logosophy, Science and Method, basically says, to recover time that has passed is an arduous task. It is much less difficult to go forth and meet the time we still have to live, offering it space within ourselves, so that in turning itself into today and later into tomorrow, it shall make it flourish in its most beautiful conception and reality. So when I read this, I started asking myself a number of important questions, like, how could I manage my time more efficiently? Do I waste a lot of time with useless things or useless thoughts? Is my perception of how I waste my time a good reflection of the reality of how I actually spend it? How do others spend their time, especially people that I admire or that I consider successful? How much time do I spend with my family and my loved ones? So to try to answer some of these questions, I made a small exercise of trying to track my time, not literally tracking every minute, but just paying more attention on how I spend the 24 hours that are given to me each day, no matter what happens. Not surprisingly, I realized that I spend a lot of times doing nothing or spending time on activities that are futile and that feels a little bit like wasted time. Things like watching TV, playing apps on my phones, social media. And, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of these activities are important and we all need our downtime and doing a little bit of nothing. But, I would encourage you to do that same exercise that I did. And you might be surprised how much time you spend on these activities. So anyways, after I've been able to establish roughly a pattern of how much time I spend on each of these, on each activity during my day, I ask myself an even more critical question, which is, what would I change in the way that I spend my time today? And I want to read another quote, from the author that says, one must live one's life as if the hours were minutes. In that conference, he goes on explaining what he means by that. And it's basically that we should try to accomplish at least one thing, not every hour, but basically every minute, so that in each hour, we're able to accomplish 60 different things. Now, that doesn't mean those things have to be super complicated, and that doesn't mean you have to go faster. It just means being more focused or dedicated to what you do. And in my experience, my limited experience, I think this concept can be applied to pretty much everything that we do in our life, including the time that we spend with our children. So I'll give you an example on how I try to apply this in my personal life. my wife usually picks up my daughter at school. It's quite far. It's like 30, 45 minutes to go and come back. But I've set myself a goal to go pick up my daughter myself, take time off work and go pick her up at least twice a week. So that when we come back from school, I can use this time with my daughter to talk with her about life, about school, about anything, basically. Just spend quality time talking with her. And the best thing for me is that she can't go anywhere, right? She's stuck in the car with me. She can't just go to her room like she would do if we're at home, for example. So anyways, all of this to say that it's not easy, I understand. At least it's not for me. But I think that by paying more attention to how I spend my time in setting myself some objectives, that's really allowed me to manage my time more efficiently and ultimately spend more quality time with my children. I'm going to turn it back to Flavio to continue.
Thanks, Francois. So going back to the framework, a group of resources that I do like to study is the mental faculties. As I said before, the mental faculties altogether converge on our intelligence. Our intelligence, we all know, has many different capabilities, and logosophy names them as faculties. And the one that most of the time triggers all the mechanism of intelligence is the observation. Observation is a very useful tool since it helps to learn with the experience that we see around us and also that happen inside of us. Francois just gave a great example on how paying attention helped him to make a better use of the time with his daughter. So when I was dating my wife and we decided to marry, I don't have a lot of clues to how to be a good husband. So I start consciously to observe the other couples and how they behave, trying to extract the right elements of those experiences that would inspire my behavior as in my marriage, as a husband. And I did the same thing with babies and young children. So unfortunately, they come with no manual, no instructions guide. So while we were married without kids, I observed a lot the parents close to me in order to see how they were raising their children. So what are the good things that should be done? What they are teaching to them to behave in the right way. And I kept doing this. So when they were pre-teenagers, 10, 11 years old, I start to do the same with the families close to me that have teenagers. So what was the best approach to them? And we can learn a lot. I can highlight that one of the important things that I learned with this experience, especially with young children, was setting limits to them, not allowing them to do anything they want. This is a very strong foundation to build their character. But we need to set the limits, giving the right reasons, explaining what is right and what is wrong. The catch here is to combine the observation with the other faculties of intelligence, like reflection and reasoning, to create and explain the reasons for them to behave. It's not to obey just because we are saying so. With the right reasons, it's much easier for children to understand and decide what is the right thing to do. But one thing regarding observation that we shall never forget, that our kids are observing us all the time. So another aspect that must be considered is the importance of our own example and our behavior. That everything that I'm teaching to my children needs to be supported by my own actions. There is a teaching from the book Initiation Course into Logosophy that states, every moral teaching not endorsed by the example set by the one who dictates it has a contrary effect on the soul of the person who receives it. So I had this experience with my youngest son, Dante. And Dante is a soccer player. In fact, he was just playing right now, so I was not able to see his game today. And he's a very good player, by the way. Fortunately, he's not like his father, because I have two left legs playing soccer. But he trains really hard to be in his team. But one day, he was tired and not willing to go to practice. So I told him that I used to have my practice also, and I used to wake up early. And what I did, I created a thought that helped me to remember that I never regret to go to practice once I did it. And he started to apply this technique with reasonable success. But one day, I believe it was Friday before the weekend, he asked me what I would do the next day. And I told him, well, I would like to ride my bike. I joined a bike club here in Katy, where I live, but I'm a bit tired and I'm not willing to wake up early. He smiled to me and said, Dad, come on. You should remember that you never regret when you are able to go to your practice. So this experience showed me that not only I have to walk the talk, but I could do better use of my mental defenses. So mental defenses are thoughts that we create in our mind to protect our inner world and mainly to sustain our purposes from thoughts that are playing against our will. When we start to observe yourself internally, you're going to see that thoughts are mental entities with their own will that could help us or not, depending on their nature. And Dante, again, gave me another good example on how to apply mental defenses. He told me that he started a new subject in algebra and was not understanding anything. At first, he was in despair. But then he told me that he was able to remember that this should not be a problem, since we can always study together when he's having problems with math. For me, it was a very good example how he was able to control himself and use these mental defenses. Just remembering that he has a support and that he could deal with the situation later was enough to avoid despair. And what I really liked in this situation, that besides the mental defenses, he was also able to practice another logosophical concept, that we should put our problems inside our life and not our life inside our problems. We need to expand our life in order to make problems smaller in relation to it. But we have all these experiences with young children, and we think that so they are difficult. Prepare yourself for when they become teenagers. It's a whole new level of the game, I can assure you. That image of hero and reference built along the childhood, it starts to faint, and they start to challenge you all the time. I say that it's when kryptonite start to have some effects on me because I began to lose my superpowers. In this phase, reasoning, observations, mental defenses are important, but they are not enough. We need to build a stronger bond with them, not only based on love, but mainly on respect and trust. These two moral assets are paramount in my experience with teenagers. I had to learn that they are individuals with their own experiences and wishes, and they are able to decide the paths to follow in life, not only the one I was trying to teach them. There is another logosophical teaching that states that it's necessary to follow examples that are worth of being achieved. Achieved, not imitated, since imitations are not always good. So I had this experience with my eldest son, Theo, when he was deciding his future in college. So I have been practicing sports and martial arts since I was 4 years old. And this is something really serious in my life. And so my kids started to practice the sports early also. With months, they were already in a pool. When we got here in high school, Theo joined the swimming team. He trained hard 2 times a day. So he was able to become a district champion, and he was awarded as the MVP at school, having chances to get reasonable offers to swim in colleges. Of course, my expectations were really high about this opportunity, and I supported him in every way I could to make this happen. But in the end, it was not what he wanted for his life. He could not stand keep swimming over 10,000 yards a day during college. And in the end, he decided to quit the pools. It was hard for me to understand, but I had to respect his decision and trust that he was choosing the best for his life. My wife and I have always told our children that we advise and educate them to enable them to make the right decisions in order to have a happy and good life. If swimming would not make him happy, what was the point in insisting there? I had to trust his own judgment and choices. I can say today this episode reinforces the respect that we have for each other. He even jokes today that he has PTSD with pools and he avoids pools even in pool parties. So what I got here, that even if we were quite successful in the decisions we made for ourselves in the past, we have to learn to respect their own decisions. And for that, we need to trust them. Trust is a moral asset that we really need to cultivate. If we have so much trust in ourselves, we can give some of it to our children. When they are about to face a challenge or something new and they are not completely secure, they don't have an idea how to deal with that, showing trust that we have on them helps a lot. So this happened when my favorite daughter, Nina, got her license to drive by herself and started to go out with friends at night. At first, my wife, Bia, and I were very concerned. But then we saw that there is not much to do here. So we had a good conversation, remembering that we have already taught a lot of things to her and her brothers. And now it was time to trust her. I'm sorry. And because we had to trust, because we will not be by her side forever. We had to start respecting the fact that they were becoming young adults with values, and hopefully they will make the right decisions when needed, because we gave them good resources. So Nina now is driving by herself for over 2 years, and she has never got in trouble. She's always on time in the time that we agree to be at home. And then we could perceive how the high level of trust between us make our relationship much better. I will hand over back to Francois in order to bring his own experience with his youngest daughter.
All right. Thank you, Flavio. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about things that I've learned with my youngest daughter. On a discussion, a topic we would call the gender versus gender identity. So for me, gender was just, something that you fill in a form. It's basically your birth sex. It's male or female. And so she introduced me to the concept of gender identity, which is basically your own individual experience of gender. So it's a person's sense of being either a woman, a man, neither, both, or anywhere in the middle. And it can be, of course, the same or different from your birth sex. So for me, I have to be honest with you, it's a concept that's still somewhat difficult to grasp. And I think not just for me, but for a lot of people of my generation. But having those frequent interchanges with my daughter has certainly brought me to be a little bit more open-minded about all of this. And most importantly, like Flavio was saying, to respect my daughter for not just for what she's thinking, but for her bringing me new concept, teaching me basically new concepts. So what does all of this have to do with logosophy? Well, in the book called Initiation Course to Logosophy, there's a concept that states logosophy as instituted as a principle that the word belief must be replaced by the word knowledge, because it's by knowing and not by believing that a man becomes truly conscious of the management of his life. So how does one do this exactly? And probably easier said than done, right? What I found really interesting about logosophy is that despite, I should say, what the statement that I just read to you, at the same time, logosophy says you should not just throw in the trash all the beliefs that you have accumulated through your prior life in education, basically. But you should reflect upon those beliefs. So my understanding is that, we should focus on comparing the beliefs that we have acquired during our lives with the principles and concepts that are presented by others, including those that are presented by logosophy, so that we can, at the end of the day, make our own choice of, what we know, basically. So, in other words, I understand that we should not simply accept anything that we are being told or taught, even what logosophy is teaching us. Okay, it's not just a question of just don't believe everything he's saying. That don't believe everything I tell you, but we should rather experiment for ourselves and then decide what we want to believe. So, I think that this applies to concepts, ideas, and values that were transmitted to us by our parents as well. So I guess my daughter, when she challenges me on the question of gender versus gender identity, she is somewhat applying logosophical concepts without even knowing it. So, in conclusion, I think that having frequent interchanges like this with my daughter on this topic, but other topics similar to that as well, I think it's influenced my general behavior or conduct on how I approach any interchange with other people on any topic when those people have a very different opinion than I do on a certain topic. So now I try a lot more to understand their point of view rather than try to prove that my point of view or my understanding is the correct one. So I research, I read basically on the topic so that I can form my own opinion, basically. All right. Well, thank you. Pass it back over to Flavio.
Thanks again, Francois. So we named this activity as a workshop. So there is a practical part of it. And this is about an exercise that I did myself, that I would like to share the results with you, but I would like mainly to recommend that you do this with your own children. So I asked my 3 children to write a letter to me addressing 3 questions. What they have what they have been learning with me, what in their understanding I have been learning with them, and the most delicate and challenging one, what they should do differently if they were my parents and I their child. It was a very insightful experience reading what they wrote to me. I do recommend you ask them to write instead of having a conversation, because writing gives them more time to reflect and remember what they have been taught and what they would like to see better in their father. So, Francois, can you please? Okay, great. So these here are the 3 letters that I received. So in order to show that they are real, and also I did a disclaimer to them, so I should show the letters, and they told me, okay, no problem. But I would try to be straight to the points that they answer. So Theo wrote me that the most important thing that he learned from me was the concept of respect. And on my end, I have been learning with him how to become a more patient being his father. And that in my place, he would change one thing, being a little less demanding over a cup of duties. And I can tell that I'm a really demanding father. The 3 of them know this very well. So Nina highlighted the power of my determination, which is an inspiring drive towards her goals. And she also understands that I'm becoming a more patient person being her dad. Dante, in the end, like Theo, wrote that respect is one of the most valuable things that he learned with me. And he would do one thing differently, be gentler and nicer when correcting him. And I can say that has been a real challenge when you have to ask the same thing 10,000 times a week. So I need to agree with Dante that I'm a work in progress in this aspect. And what about I'm learning with him? Guess what? That I'm becoming more patient being his father. So they did not agree before writing the letters. So I was really glad to find in all of them the elements of love that I mentioned before, especially patience and tolerance. Being conscious of them, I can use a resource that was presented in the framework before, the sensitive faculty of loving. So this faculty contributes to the creation, growth, and perpetuation of our affective feelings. So by knowing these elements and working consciously with them, I have been able to cherish and grow the very important feeling of love in my heart. So getting to the end of our activity, I would like to highlight the main takeaways tonight. So we really hope that was a useful time for you all and that you learned some new concepts and interests that you could apply in your life. So these are the main takeaways. So to become more conscious of our internal resources. So we have a huge inner world with our minds, our intelligence, our sensitivity, our thoughts, our spirit, our soul. So there is a lot of things to know internally. To make an intelligent use of our time, especially with our children. And for that, we need to pay more attention to reinforce observation. And remember that they will be observing us, so we always must be a good example to them, especially for the things that we are teaching them. Invest in respect and trust. If you do not know how to begin with trust. So trust them, and then the respect will come naturally afterwards. Change belief by knowledge, because it's knowing, not believing, that we can have a conscious management of our life. And always cultivate the 3 elements of love: patience, tolerance, and constancy. I can say that the best way to show how grateful I am to my parents for everything I received from them is to become the best father I can to my children. So I would like to conclude with a teaching from the book Introduction to Logosophical Cognition that says, logosophy relies on 2 powerful forces, which, when united and bound, lead man to accomplish the 2 aims of his existence: to evolve towards perfection and to constitute himself as a real contributor to humanity. One of these forces is the knowledge that it offers to the human mind, The other is the affection that it teaches how to fulfill in human hearts. So thank you very much for your attention. We hope that was a useful activity for you all. And if you want more information about logosophy, there is the website, logosophy.org. And also you can email us at info@logosophy.org. So thank you very much and have you all a good one. Till the next time.